arrow after arrow. But still he refused to yield, drawing a new bow and firing 5 swift shafts at Drona. 2 warriors clashed their bows, singing as they exchanged blows. The air was filled with the scent of sweat and blood, and the earth shook beneath their feet. Sanjaya watched in awe as Drishtadyumna stood firm, his shield flashing like a mountain peak as he deflected arrow after arrow. However, would not be deterred. He cut down Drishtadyumna's bow, leaving the prince to face him with nothing but a mace in hand. The 2 warriors circled each other, their eyes locked in a fire stare. Sanjaya watched as Drona's mace shattered beneath Drishtadyumna's blows. Undeterred, the Panchala prince drew a new shield and scimitar, charging forward like a lion into battle. But Drona was ready for him, his arrows flying swift and true. Sanjaya watched in amazement as the 2 warriors clashed their bows, singing out in a deadly rhythm. Just when it seemed that Drishtadyumna would emerge victorious, the mighty Pandava warrior burst out of the scene, firing 7 sharp-pointed arrows at Drona, and sending the bowman stumbling backwards. Sanjaya watched as the prince of Panchala was taken up by his charioteer and whisked away. The sun beat down upon the vast battlefield as King Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana urged the mighty king of Kalinga to attack. Bhima, the powerful warrior from the Pandava clan, the king of Kalinga, accompanied by a large army, advanced towards Bhima with his chariot and troops. Bhima, undeterred by the sheer numbers against him, stood firm, supported by his Aulis, the Cheetahs, Matsyas, and Karashas. As the battle commenced, the sound of clashing steel echoed through the air, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The combatants clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood, each side determined to emerge victorious. Bhima, like a raging storm, cut through the enemy ranks with his mace, sending chariots and warriors crashing to the ground. His opponents, fueled by rage and desperation, hurled themselves at him. But Bhima stood firm, his strength unyielding. He fought on his sword, slishing through the chaos, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. A king of Kalinga, enraged by Bhima's ferocity, shot arrows at him with deadly precision. But Bhima, unfazed, cut them down with ease, his scimitar flashing in the sunlight. The ruler of Kalinga's son, Sakritava, joined the fray. But Bhima was relentless, cutting through the enemy lines like a hot knife through butter. As the battle raged on, the king of Kalinga, overcome by grief and rage, hurled himself at Bhima with 14 bearded darts. But Bhima, undaunted, cut them down in an instant, his sword slishing through the air with deadly precision. The king's elephant, Bhinima, charged forward, but Bhima leaped onto its back, his sword flashing as he struck down the prince of elephants. The battlefield was a scene of utter chaos and destruction, with warriors and elephants falling left and right. But Bhima stood tall, his sword slishing through the mayhem, his strength unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. Like a raging storm, he cut through the enemy ranks, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. As the battle reached its climax, Bhima's sword rose and fell with deadly precision, cutting down warriors and elephants. Like his opponents, he, exhausted and demoralized, faltered beneath his onslaught. And when the dust finally settled, Bhima stood victorious, his sword still raised high in triumph. The battle raged on its fury, unabated as the day wore on. Sanjaya watched with a keen eye, narrating the events to the king Drishtadyumna. The prince of Panchala engaged himself in battle against 3 mighty Kar warriors, Drona's sons Selaya and Kripa, with many sharp shafts. He slew the steeds of Drola's son, celebrated over all the world, deprived of his Hanibals. Drona's son quickly got up on Selaya's chariot and showered his shafts at the Panchala king. But Drishtadyumna was not to be underestimated. He fought with valor, piercing Selaya with 25 arrows and Kripa with 9. Meanwhile Aswadaman pierced him with 8 sharp arrows. Then Suvadra's son Abhimanyu rushed into the fray, scattering his arrows with deadly precision. His cousin Lakshmana was not far behind. Driven by rage and a desire to prove himself, the 2 cousins clashed their bows, singing as they exchanged arrow for arrow. Abhimanyu's 500 arrows found their mark, but Lakshmana refused to back down. The battle intensified. Duryodhana, king of the Kuras, beheld his son thus afflicted by Abhimanyu and rushed to the scene. The kings surrounding Abhimanyu with their chariots, elephants, and steeds were a formidable sight. But Abhimanyu, equal in prowess to Krishna, himself remained unflappable. Dhananjaya, Arjuna's father, saw his son thus surrounded and hastened to his aid. Bhishma and Drona led the Kuru army against him, but their efforts were for naught. A thick dust cloud enveloped the battlefield as the armies clashed, obscuring the sun from view. The earth itself seemed to tremble as Arjuna's arrows flew forth, piercing elephants, chariots, and warriors alike. The Kurus host was routed, their standards broken, and their leaders fled in terror. Even the great Bhishma could not withstand the onslaught of Arjuna's shafts. The sun dipped below the horizon of Devrita. Bhishma addressed Drona with a mixture of sadness and admiration. This mighty son of Pandu, accompanied by Krishna, is dealing with our troops, as he alone can. He is incapable of being vanquished in battle today. With that, Bhishma ordered the withdrawal of their army, acknowledging that they were no match for Arjuna's prowess. Twilight set in. Both armies retreated from the battlefield, their warriors weary and demoralized. The day had been one of unrelenting carnage, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. As the night gave way to dawn, Bhishma, the great grandsire of the Kurus, stood on the battlefield, his eyes fixed on the armies arrayed before him. He was determined to lead his troops to victory against the Pandavas, who had been exiled for years and were now seeking revenge. Bhishma's army formed a mighty array known as the Garuda, with its leader at the forefront. The two eyes of this formation were none other than Hiradipta, son of Bharadwaja, and Kritavarman, a noble warrior from Sapata. Aswathaman and Kripa, renowned for their bravery, stood at the head of the army, supported by the Trigardas, Matsas, Kikeas, and Vetatanas. The neck of the Garuda was adorned with powerful warriors: Durasreva, Sausalya, Thagadatta, Jayadratha, and many others. These mighty men were joined by the Medric assigned to Salvirus and Panchanadas, all eager to fight for their king's honor. At the back of this formation stood Duryodhana, surrounded by his loyal followers, while Vinda and Anuvinda, along with the Kamojasekas and Shurasnas, formed the tail of the army. The Magas, Kalingas, and Desarex, all clad in armor, made up the right wing. Meanwhile, on the left wing stood the Karashas, Vaikanjas, Mundus, and Kondavrishas, led by Vridadvala. These armies, so proud and eager for battle, seemed almost invincible. Bhishma's army took its place. Arjuna, the son of Pandu, surveyed his own troops with a keen eye. He knew that this would be a battle unlike any other, one that would decide the fate of their kingdom. With Drishtadyumna by his side, he formed his army into a counter-array, mirroring Bhishma's formation. The right horn of Arjuna's array was led by them, surrounded by kings from far-off lands, all armed to the teeth. Next to him stood Bharata and Drupada, mighty Kar warriors who had pledged their loyalty to the Pandavas. Nala, with his envenomed weapons, stood guard over them. In the middle of the array stood Prestadyama, Sikhandan, and the Panchalas, supported by other brave warriors. King Yudhishthira, just and fair, led his elephant division into battle, while Satyaki, Iravan, and Ghatotkacha stood ready to fight alongside him. Finally, on the left horn of Arjuna's array stood Krishna, the protector of the sun. Beat down upon the vast expanse of the battlefield as the armies of the Pandavas and Kauravas clashed in a frenzy of steel and splintered wood. Sanjaya, the chronicler of this epic struggle, watched with rapt attention as the mighty Kar warrior Anjaya, Arjuna, unleashed his arrows upon the enemy ranks like the destroyer himself. At the end of the Arjuna's wrath was a force to be reckoned with. The Kauravas fought on, undeterred by their losses, driven by desire for glory and a refusal to yield. They broke through the Pandava lines in several places, but were themselves broken as well. The battle raged on, with neither side able to gain the upper hand. Dust swirled around them, obscuring the sun and blinding all who fought us. The carnage intensified. Sanjaya saw warriors from both armies engage one another in fierce combat. Kar warriors clashed with Kar warriors, their polished swords flashing in the sunlight as they exchanged blows. Elephant riders thundered across the battlefield, their broad-headed shafts and arrows shattering the ranks of their foot infantry. Fought infantry, their shore arrows and battle axes biting deep into the flesh of their opponents. The air was thick with the scent of blood, and sweet as both armies struggled for dominance. Sanjaya watched in awe as the combatants seemed to lose all sense of direction, fighting on without regard for the cardinal points or even their own lives in this maelstrom of chaos. Bhishma and Drona, two of the greatest warriors on either side, emerged as leaders. They broke through the Pandava lines with ease, but were soon met by a counterattack from them. Satyaki and Ghatotkacha, the Rakshas of sun. The battle raged on, with neither side able to gain the upper hand. As the fight intensified, Duryodhana, the Kaurava prince, rallied his troops and led a fierce charge against the Pandavas. Arjuna, his anger burning bright, led the counterattack, supported by Satyaki and Abhimanyu, his son. The battle was a blur of steel and blood, with warriors from both sides falling left and right in this terrible and awful conflict. Sanjaya saw the very fabric of the world begin to unravel. Innumerable headless trunks rose up around him, a grim testament to the destruction that had been wrought And yet even in the midst of such carnage the warriors fought on, driven by their unyielding desire for victory. The battle raged on with falcon eye. Arjuna at its center, the Kaurava kings, fueled by rage, surrounded him with thousands of chariots, unleashing a torrent of arrows, lances, and masses. But Arjuna, undaunted, countered their assault with his gold-decked arrows, showcasing his superhuman skill. As the battle intensified, Satyaki and Abhimanyu found themselves besieged by Subala's son and his army. The brave warriors, led by Subala's son, cut into pieces Satyaki's car, but he swiftly retreated to Abhimanyu's vehicle together. They began to slaughter the enemy with straight arrows. Meanwhile, Drona and Bhishma continued to clash with the Pandavas' troops, cutting them down with sharp shafts. But despite their valiant efforts, the Kaurava army faltered, and thousands of chariot warriors fled in all directions. The once mighty host was now in disarray, and Gadhakika fought bravely, achieving remarkable feats on the battlefield. However, Duryodhana's arrival checked their momentum. But Bhimsena soon regained his composure, piercing Duryodhana with an arrow that left him senseless. The Kaurava army broke ranks, fleeing in terror as the battle reached its climax. Prasha's son Drishadyamna and King Yudhishthira joined forces to slaughter the enemy troops. Their sharp arrows proved merciless, cutting down countless warriors. Even Bhishma and Drona struggled to contain the chouse, but their efforts were ultimately in vain. With their army in shambles, Duryodhana turned to his grandfather Bhishma, seeking guidance. Grandsire, he implored, listen to what I say. When you are alive, and Drona, Kripa, and our other allies are too, how can it be that my army flees in terror? The Pandavas cannot match your prowess or mine, nor can they rival the might of Drona's son or Kripa. Bhishma's response was stern. Many times I have spoken to you words worthy of acceptance and fraught with good, but you refuse to heed them. The Pandavas are invincible in battle, even against the gods themselves. However, I shall do what I can to check their progress. Witness it now, O king, for I shall fight alone to defend your honor. The stage was set for an epic confrontation between Bhishma and the Pandavas. As the two armies clashed, conches blared, drums thundered, and cymbals rang out in a cacophony of sound. The battle would rage on, with its outcome hanging precariously in the balance. The sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos. Below, Dhritarashtra's son Bhishma, still fueled by rage, had rushed towards the Pandava army with a large force of soldiers. Behind him, the king's eyes widened as he asked his charioteer Sanjaya to recount the events that had transpired. Sanjaya began to speak, his voice filled with emotion. O Bharata, after the forenoon had passed, the high-souled Pandavas emerged victorious. Your sire Devavrata, also known as Vishnu, rode towards us on the fleet steeds protected by a large force, and all your sons. The battle that ensued was unlike any other, with the twanging of bows and flapping of bowstrings creating an ear-piercing uproar. As Sanjaya spoke, the saying unfolded before Dhritarashtra's eyes like a nightmare come to life. The sound of falling coats of mail crowns and diadems was like thunder on a stony ground. He described the air was filled with the cries of the wounded and dying, their bodies strewn across the battlefield like blue crests of hills. Bhishma, the son of Santanu, stood tall amidst the joust, his bow incessantly drawn to a circle as he shot shafts of blazing points that resembled snakes of virulent poison. He danced along the track of his chariot, his movements so swift and light that it seemed like he was present everywhere at once. The Pandavas, led by Arjuna, were no match for Bhishma's prowess. His arrows flew true, striking down warriors with each their bodies, pierced as if by the gods themselves. The army of the sons of Pandu wavered and faltered, their cries of woe and alas echoing through the air. As Sanjaya continued his tale, Dhritarashtra's eyes grew wide with horror. His own son Bhishma was wreaking havoc on the battlefield, his arrows flying like a storm unleashed by the gods. The king's mind reeled as he watched his army crumble before his very eyes. Just then Krishna, the delighter of the Yadavas, intervened, urging Arjuna to strike down Bhishma and end the carnage. The hour is now come, O Partha, he said, his voice filled with urgency. Strike Bhishma, else thou wilt lose the senses. Arjuna's chariot thundered towards Bhishma, its wheels shrouded in an arrowy downpour. The two warriors clashed their bows, singing as they exchanged arrows. The fate of the battle hung in the balance, and Dhritarashtra could only watch in awe as his son and Arjuna engaged in a duel for the aegis. The king As the night gave way to dawn, the high-souled Bhishma, his wrath fueled by a desire for battle, led the mighty Kuru army into the fray. He was flanked by his loyal companions, including Drona, Duryodhana, and Jayadratha, their divisions arrayed in perfect order like celestial warriors on the battlefield of the gods. They advanced, the magnificent standards borne aloft on the backs of elephants shone brightly, their collars red, yellow, black, and brown waving in the air like a rainbow-hued banner. The army itself seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, its cavalry, infantry, and chariots arrayed before it like a stormy mass of clouds charged with lightning. The Kuru army's approach was met by the Pandavas led by Arjuna, his standard bearing the image of Hanuman, the prince of his division, bolstered by the mighty car warrior Keratin and protected by an impenetrable shield, seemed invulnerable to attack us. The two armies clashed. The air was filled with the cacophony of drums beating loudly, conches blaring, trumpets shrieking, and leonine shouts echoing through the battlefield. The earth shook beneath their feet as bowstrings twined, and arrows whizzed past, striking shields emblazoned with golden stars that shone like tiny suns. The battle raged on, its fury matched only by the intensity of Bhishma's wrath. He struck down warriors left and right, his mighty car warriors falling before him like autumn leaves in a gale. The earth was bathed in an airy dust that made it seem as if a vast canopy had been spread above his. The combatants flashed their cries, mingling with the thunder of hooves and the crash of chariots. The battlefield became a maelstrom of chouse warriors, fell their bodies, battered by elephant trunks and tusked heads, while others stumbled through the dust, blinded by the swirling clouds of earth in this midst of mayhem. Vishma's gaze locked onto Arjuna, his standard shining like a beacon in the darkness. The two warriors faced each other, their bows singing with deadly intent as they clashed in a duel that would shake the very foundations of the battlefield. Bhishma, his energy unyielding, hurled a river of arrows at Arjuna, but the Pandava warrior dodged and weaved through the hail his Gandava, singing its own song of thunder. He returned fire with a shower of sharp-edged arrows that seemed to disperse like autumn leaves before Bhishma's mighty shield. The Kurus and Srinjayas watched in awe as these two titans clashed their bows, twining out a deadly rhythm that echoed through the ages. The battle raged on, its outcome hanging prick. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Arjuna's grandson Keratin fought valiantly against the forces of Duryodhana like a young lion. He roared into battle, his energy and prowess inspiring awe in all who beheld him. His father, Subhadra's son, was a master archer, and no one could match his skill with the bow or his bravery in combat. His Keratin clashed with the enemy, his mighty bow shone like the sun, and his arrows flew swift and true, piercing even the most formidable foes. He struck down Drona's son with a single shaft, and Salya with 5, sending their standards tumbling to the ground. The standard of Samyamanai's son was no match for Keratin's 8 arrows, and soon his golden staff was shattered by another sharp-edged arrow. Salya, Drona's son, and Samyamanai himself were all struck with fear as they beheld the strength of Keratin's arms. They knew that no one could stand before him in battle. The Trigarchus, Madras, and Kikayas, numbering 5 and 20,000 strong, urged by Duryodhana's son, surrounded Keratin with his father, determined to slay them both. But Arjuna, the commander of the Pandava army, beheld the danger that threatened his family. With many thousands of elephants, cars, and cavalry at his command, he advanced against the enemy division, leading his troops with him. The division, protected by Arjuna's renowned bowmen, looked resplendent as it charged into battle. As Arjuna approached, he struck Saradwat's son on the shoulder joint with 3 arrows, and then pierced the Madrakas with 10 sharp shafts. Quickly slaying their protector, he also slew Dimana, the heir of Parva, with a broad-headed arrow. Samyamanai's son retaliated by striking Arjuna with 10 shafts, but the prince of Panchala was unyielding. The battle raged on, with both sides trading blows and arrows flying thick and fast. But in the end it was Keratin who emerged victorious, his mass crushing Samyamanai's son beneath its mighty weight. The prince of Panchala, Arjuna, won great renown for slaying his foes. The battle subsided. A loud cry of "Oh!" and alas arose among Duryodhana's troops, mourning the loss of their brave warrior. Samyamanai himself rushed into battle, his rage unquenchable. But Arjuna stood firm, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The two armies watched in awe as these two princes, both mighty car warriors and great bowmen, clashed in a file. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapura, sat on his throne surrounded by the choice of war. His trusted advisor Sanjaya stood before him, recounting the tale of the ongoing battle between the Pandavas and their enemies. Your son, Duryodhana, has been at the forefront of this conflict. Sanjaya said, his voice laced with a hint of sorrow, but alas, it seems that no matter how valiantly he fights, the tide of battle turns against him. Dhritarashtra's face twisted in anguish as he listened to Sanjaya's words. He had always believed that destiny was more powerful than human effort, and now it seemed that his own son's fate was sealed. Sanjaya continued, the mighty Prishada's son, Drishtadyumna, has been a thorn in the side of your army with his unmatched archery skills. He has slain many of our warriors, including Selya, the ruler of Madrasa. Sanjaya spoke. The sounds of clashing steel and war cries filled the air. The battle raged on, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. Duryodhana, determined to turn the tide of battle in his favor, urged his elephant division forward, accompanied by the Magadha king. He advanced towards Bhima, who stood tall as mass at the ready. The two armies clashed, with elephants trumpeting and warriors screaming as they fought for their lives. Bhima, undaunted by the sheer number of enemies before him, charged forward his mighty mass, crushing elephant after elephant. As the battle raged on, Duryodhana's forces began to falter. Elephant after elephant fell to Bhima's powerful blows, their trunks and tusks shattered beyond recognition. A Magadha king's elephant, a behemoth of a beast, was slain by Subhadra's son with a single arrow. The ruler of the Magadhas himself tried to flee, but Drishtadyumna cut him down with a swift stroke, ending his life on the battlefield. Bhima, still wielding his mask, continued his ravage, crushing elephant after elephant beneath his feet. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, it seemed that the tide of war had finally turned in favor of the Pandavas. The once mighty Duryodhana's army lay broken and battered, their warriors either slain or fled. Dhritarashtra listened to Sanjaya's words, his heart heavy with grief. He knew that his son's fate was all but sealed, and that the outcome of this war would be a crushing defeat. For the Kirabas, the blind king, sat in silence, his mind reeling with the weight of what he had heard. As the sun beat down on the battlefield, Sanjaya's words painted a vivid picture of the carnage unfolding before King Dhritarashtra. When that elephant division was exterminated, he began. The son, Duryodhana, urged his entire army to slay them. As in a massive host, a sea of warriors, elephants and steeds blundered towards Bhima. Like a stormy scene on the day of full moon or new moon, the air was thick with dust. Conch shells blared and drums pounded out a fierce rhythm. At the forefront of this tidal wave was Duryodhana's army, driven by their anger and determination to vanquish Bhima. But Bhima stood firm, his mass at the ready, like the unyielding mountain Meru. He resisted the onslaught, his powerful blows checking the advance of the enemy forces. His brother sons and all these, Drishtadyumna, the sons of Draupadi, Abhimanyu and Sakhandan, fought alongside him, their valor unwavering in the face of overwhelming odds. As the battle raged on, Bhima's mass sliced through the enemy ranks like a sail, cutting down. With each swing, he sent Kara warriors tumbling to the ground, their horses and chariots crushed beneath his feet. The field of battle became a ghastly body, strewn with the bodies of slain men and beasts. The mass itself seemed to take on a life of its own, its iron head smeared with blood, fought and marrow as it struck down elephant and horse alike. Its power was akin to that of Indra's bolt, while its ferocity rivaled that of Rudra's Pinaka. All who beheld Bhima in his fury felt their spirits crushed, their wills broken by the sheer force of his wrath as he advanced like death, itself routing the enemy lines. With each step, all the warriors became cheerless. Wherever Bhima cast his gaze, the enemy seemed to melt away, as if his very presence was a harbinger of doom. And then on his solar chariot, Bhima set his sights on the advancing figure of Bhishma, their eyes locked in a fierce confrontation. It was at this moment that Satyaki, the grandson of Sinai, leaped into action, firing arrows at Bhishma's enemies. As he approached, his sharp shafts scattered enemy warriors like autumn leaves before a gale. Even Masha the Rakshasa could not resist his onslaught, pierced by 4 of Satyaki's arrows in quick succession. The battle raged on. Satyaki's car thundered through the enemy ranks, scattering arrowy downpours upon them, like a stormy sky pouring rain onto the mountain braced, yet none quailed. In the midst of the fierce battle, King Duryodhana's sons, led by Nandika, clashed with Bhima. The mighty armed warrior Nandika pierced Bhima with keen-edged arrows, but Bhima, undeterred, vowed to slay all his enemies. In that very spot, as Bhima spoke, these words, he charged forward on his chariot, driven by Vizuk. Duryodhana himself joined the fray, striking Bhima with 9 sharp arrows. But Bhima, his anger unrelenting, drew another bow and shot an arrow with a horse show head, cutting off Duryodhana's resplendent bowed Kaurava warriors, however would not be defeated so easily. Duryodhana, enraged, took up another bow and aimed a terrible shaft that pierced Bhima between his 2 breasts. The mighty warrior fell to the ground, swooning in pain, but Bhimasena was not one to stay down for long, regaining consciousness. He shot 5 arrows at Duryodhana, and then 25 more at Salya, piercing him with golden-tipped shafts. Salya was borne away from the battle, defeated Dhritarashtra's 14 sons, including Senapati Sushana and Jalasena, charged against Bhimasena, showering him with countless arrows. But Bhima, his strength unyielding, cut down each of them one by one, Senapati with a shaft having a horse show head, Jalasena with 3 arrows, and Agra with a single broad-headed shaft. As the battle raged on, Magadhata, riding an elephant of rent temples, suddenly appeared on the scene. He shrouded Bhima in arrowy showers, making him invisible like clouds covering the sun. But the Pandava warriors, relying on their own prowess, could not bear that shrouding, and surrounded Magadhata with a downpour of arrows. The elephant itself was pierced by showers of fires. Shafts, its body, smeared with blood, it became beautiful to behold, like a mass of clouds tinged with sunlight. That the mighty Kaur warriors, beholding its terrible men, became churlish. King Magadhata, enraged, struck Bhimasena between his 2 breasts with a straight shaft. The great bowman and warrior fell to the ground, holding his flagstaff, and in that moment of terror, Ghatotkacha, the Rakshasa son of Hidimbai, reappeared, assuming a fire-sworn rode on an Airavata elephant, accompanied by 3 dick elephants, Sandhana, Vamana, and Mahapadma. These mighty elephants, ridden by Rakshasas, were of huge form, with juice trickling down in 3 lines, and endued with great speed and prowess. In the midst of war, King Dhritarashtra sat on his throne, his heart heavy with fear and wonder as he listened to Sanjaya's tales of the Pandavas' feats. He had always been anxious about the outcome of the battle, but now, hearing of his sons' repeated defeats at the hands of their enemies, his anxiety turned into despair. "My sons are being slaughtered by the Pandavas." Dhritarashtra lamented to Sanjaya. "What ascetic penances have the sons of Pandu performed? What boon have they obtained that makes them invincible in battle?" He couldn't bear the thought of his army being repeatedly defeated, and he felt like a man trying to cross a vast scene with only 2 arms. Sanjaya, who had been narrating the events of the war, tried to calm the king's fears. "Your sons are not being vanquished by any supernatural power," he said. "They have simply followed the path of righteousness and morality in their actions. The Pandavas are strong because they are guided by a sense of duty and justice." Dhritarashtra's eyes widened as Sanjaya continued. "The reason for your son's weakness lies not with the Pandavas, but with yourselves. You have disregarded the counsel of wise men like Vidura, Bhishma, and Drala, who had warned you about the dangers of war. Your arrogance and refusal to listen to their advice has led to this downfall." As Sanjaya spoke, Dhritarashtra's mind flashed back to a conversation he had with his son Duryodhana. The young prince had approached Bhishma seeking an explanation for the Pandavas' success. "Who is it that the Pandavas are relying on?" Duryodhana asked. Bhishma, the wise and venerable grandsire, smiled knowingly as he began to tell a story from ancient times. He spoke of how Brahma, the creator of the universe, had once worshipped Vasudeva, the supreme god in his divine form. "Vasudeva is the lord of the universe," Bhishma said. "He is all-powerful and all-knowing. It is because of his protection that the Pandavas are invincible in battle." As Bhishma spoke, Dhritarashtra felt a sense of awe wash over him. He realized that his son's defeat was not just due to their own weaknesses, but also to the power of Vasudeva, who protected the Pandavas like a shield. In this moment, Dhritarashtra's anxiety turned into reverence for the supreme god. He knew that he had been blind to the truth all along, and that his refusal to listen to wise counsel had led to the downfall of his sons. As Sanjaya finished speaking, the king bowed his head in humility, acknowledging the power of Vasud. In the realm of ancient wisdom, Bhishma sat in contemplation, his eyes fixed on the distant past. He began to recount a tale that had been passed down through generations of sages and gods. It was in those bygone days, Bhishma said, that I heard from the revered Brahma himself about an encounter with the Lord of the worlds. The grandfather of the universe spoke of a meeting with the Supreme Being who revealed to him the secrets of the cosmos. Through Yuga, the Lord's voice was like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and deep. As Bhishma continued his tale, he described How Brahma inquired about the identity of this divine being who is that one asked the gods, Rishis, and Gandharvas, that you have worshipped with such humility and praised in such high words. Brahman replied, He who is called Tat, he who is supreme, he who is existent at present and will be for all time. I was talking even with his ever-cheerful self. Brahma revealed to the assembly that he had solicited the Lord of the universe to take birth among humans in the family of Vasudeva, for the slaughter of the Ishras take the birth in the world of men. Brahman had said the Lord taking on a human form would be accompanied by Nara and Narayana, two ancient Rishis who were invincible in battle. Brahma described Vasudeva as the supreme mystery, the supreme refuge, the supreme Brahma, and the supreme glory. He is without decay, unmanifest, and eternal. Brahman said, He it is who hath been son is Purusha, though none can comprehend him. As Bhishma spoke of this encounter between Brahma and the Lord, his audience was filled with wonder and curiosity. He told them how the gods and rishis had listened to Brahman's words and returned to heaven in delight. Bhishma continued, and so I have heard from Rama, Markandeya, Vesa, and Narada about Vasudeva, that ancient one. They spoke of him as the eternal Lord, the supreme God of all the worlds, and the great Master from whom Brahman himself has sprung. Bhishma's words dripped with reverence as he described Vasudeva's divine nature. He is full of goodness, and divested of all the qualities of darkness and passion. Bhishma said, There, where Krishna is, there righteousness is, and there is victory. Where righteousness is, he revealed that it was through the yuga of his supreme excellence and the yuga of his self that the Pandavas were supported in their battles. Bhishma's tale came to an end as he gazed out into the distance. He is the eternal God pervading. In the midst of a grand assembly, Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, approached Bhishma, his grandfather, with an inquisitive mind. Grandsire, he said, I have heard that Vasudeva is revered as the supreme being across all worlds. I wish to know about his origin and glory. Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he began to recount the tale of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is indeed the supreme being, he declared. He is the god of gods with eyes like lotus petals shining brightly. Markandeya, a sage of great wisdom, has spoken of Govinda as the most wonderful, and the most high as the all-being, the all-soul, and the supreme male being. As Bhishma spoke his words with a texture of wonder, it is said that Vasudeva created the three elements, water, air, and fire. With a mere thought he brought forth this earth from the primordial waters. He lay down on those waters in a state of deep yoga, and from his mouth he created fire, from his breath the wind, and from his very essence speech. And the Vedas, the assembly, was transfixed as Bhishma continued to describe the creation of the worlds and the gods. He is righteousness incarnate. Bhishma declared, He is the giver of boons and the fulfiller of all desires. He is both actor and action, and he is the supreme Master. With each word, the assembly's reverence grew. Bhishma's narrative took a darker turn as he spoke of Madhu and Heshara, born from Vasudeva's ear, who threatened to destroy the very fabric of existence. But that supreme being, Bhishma said with a nod, slayed Madhu and saved the universe from this act. Vasudeva earned the name Janardana, the slayer of Madhu. As Bhishma concluded his tale, he spoke of Vasudeva's many forms, the great boar, the great lion, and the three-stepped Lord. He is both mother and father to all living creatures. Bhishma said with reverence, None has ever been or will be superior to him. With a deep bow, Duryodhana acknowledged the majesty of Vasudeva. Bhishma's words had ignited the spark within him, and he knew that his understanding of the world would never be the same. In the midst of this grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, sat with a contemplative gaze. He listened intently as Bhishma spoke of Vasudeva's glory. With an open heart, Yudhishthira sought the shelter of Kesava, the Lord of Yuga, and the earth may I be blessed. As the sun set over the kingdom, King Dhritarashtra sat enthralled by the words of Bhishma, the venerable son of Santanu. Bhishma's voice was like a gentle breeze on a summer day, carrying with it the weight of ancient wisdom and the secrets of the gods. Listen well, O king. Bhishma began, For I shall tell you of the glory of Kesava, the Lord of the gods. The great sages and rishis have spoken of him in awe and reverence, describing him as the master and the Lord of all that exists. Markandeya spoke of him as the past, present, and future, the embodiment of time itself. Frigga declared him to be the god of the gods, with an ancient form that is beyond mortal comprehension. As Bhishma's words poured forth like a river, he spoke of Kesava's many names. Vasudeva, the establisher of sacred the lord of all creatures. He told of how the sages had described him as Decha, the father of creation, and how Ainurus had spoken of him as the creator of all beings. The king's eyes grew wide with wonder as Bhishma continued to speak of Kiseva's wondrous form. His body is the unmanifest universe, he said, and his mind is the manifest world. His breath has given rise to the gods themselves. His head stretch up to the heavens, and his arms support the earth. In his stomach lie 3 worlds, and he is the eternal being. As Bhishma finished speaking, the king felt a sense of awe wash over him. He knew that he had heard something truly remarkable, a glimpse into the nature of the divine, and as he looked at the mighty warriors who stood before him, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, and his brothers, he felt a newfound respect for them. But Bhishma was not finished. Yet you have heard, O king, he said, of the glory of Kiseva and the invincibility of Nara and Narayana. You have also been told why the sons of Pandu are incapable of being slain in battle, and it is for this reason that I say to you, let peace be made with the Pandavas. As Bhishma finished speaking, he fell silent, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. The king looked at him, and then at his own sons, who stood watching him with expectant eyes. And as the night wore on, the king lay down to sleep, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had heard us. The darkness closed in around him. Bhishma slipped away into the night, leaving behind a king who was forever changed by the words of the venerable son of Santani. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when the 2 armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. The Pandavas and Dhritarashtra, their armor glinting like stars in the morning light, charged towards each other with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of the earth. As the battle lines converged, the Makara formation of Bhishma's army came into view. Its shape was that of a majestic sea monster, its jaws open wide to devour the enemy. But the Pandavas were not intimidated. They countered with their own formation, the Sena, its beak sharp and menacing. At the forefront of the Pandava army stood Bhimesna, his massive frame radiating strength and fury as he charged towards the heart of the Makara. His shafts flew like arrows from a quiver, striking true time and again as he sought to pierce the very soul of Bhishma, great warrior. Bhishma, that paragon of valor, was not one to be easily vanquished. He unleashed his mighty weapons, each one a blazing star that scorched the earth and sent the combatants reeling. But Arjuna, the illustrious son of Pandu, was not to be deterred. With Gandhava in hand, he pierced Bhishma's armor with 1,000 arrows, each one a testament to his unyielding spirit. As the battle raged on, the 2 armies clashed in a maelstrom of steel and fire. Duryodhana, that mighty warrior, beheld the carnage and remembered the slaughter of his brothers on the previous day. His rage was now a burning inferno that threatened to consume all in its path. The preceptor, he cried out to Drona, act as thou hast always done. Let us vanquish these Pandavas who are but feeble and lacking in prowess. And with those words Drona plunged into the heart of the Pandava army, his spearhead shining like a blade of light. But Satyaki, that hero from the land of Sinai, was not to be caught off guard. He stood firm against the onslaught, his shield a bulwark against the tide of steel and fire. And when Drona pierced him with 10 shafts at his shoulder joint, Bhimesna rose up in fury, his own shafts flying like arrows as he sought to protect his friend. The battle was now a maelstrom of chaos, each warrior seeking to outdo the others in valor and prowess. Bhishma, Drona, Selya, all were there, their swords flashing like lightning as they clashed with the Pandavas. And amidst this sea of steel and fire, one figure stood apart, Adamanyu, that young warrior from the land of Chidai, his heart afire with a desire for glory, with a fierce cry. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Bhishma, son of Santanu, stood tall, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was a warrior like no other, driven by his duty to protect the sons of Pandu from harm. The air was electric with tension as the 2 armies clashed their war cries, echoing through the valleys. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the mighty combatants as they charged into battle. Elephants trumpeted and steeds neighed, while conches blared and drums thundered out a rhythm that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The din was deafening, a cacophony of sound that threatened to consume everything in its path. Bhishma led the charge, his massive form cutting through the enemy lines like a scythe through wheat. His enemies trembled before him, their faces pale with fear as he unleashed his fury upon them. Heads rolled across the battlefield, severed by Bhishma's swift and deadly arrows. The earth was soon awash in a sea of blood, as if a great river had burst its banks. The battle raged on, the combatants Locked in a struggle that seemed to have no end, warriors clashed their swords, flashing in the sunlight as they exchanged blow for blow. Elephants shrieked and stabbed at their riders. Fallen or fled, the dust rose, a choking cloud that obscured all sight of the carnage. Below, amidst this chaos, Bhishma, son of Pandu, fought with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of the earth. He hurled himself at Bhishma, his massive form crashing into the veteran warrior like a storm wave against a rocky shore. The two titans clashed their blows, shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the battlefield. As the fight raged on, it seemed as if nothing could stop the carnage. Warriors fell left and right, their bodies broken and battered by the relentless onslaught of arrows and swords. The earth was soon awash in a sea of blood, as if the very gods themselves had unleashed a torrent of gore upon the battlefield. And yet, even amidst this chaos, there was a sense of beauty to be found. The warriors fought with a ferocity that was almost noble. Their faces set in determination as they clashed with one another. Their armor shone like gold in the sunlight, and their swords flashed like lightning as they exchanged blow for blow. As the battle raged on, it seemed as if nothing could stop the carnage. But even amidst this chaos, there was a sense of inevitability to it all. The outcome of the fight was already clear, though no one knew who would emerge victorious in the end. All that mattered was the struggle itself, the clash of titans that would decide the fate of the Pandavas and the Kauravas once and for all. Just then King Duryodhana, surrounded by a large, the sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos that unfolded before it. The warriors of the Kauravas and Pandavas clashed in a frenzy of steel and dust, their cries echoing through the air like thunder. Sanjaya, a wise and a sage, stood witness to the carnage, his heart heavy with sorrow as he beheld Arjuna, the wielder of Gandhava, rushing towards Bhishma, the son of Gandhava. Sanjaya's own heart began to tremble with fear. The sound of Panchajanya, Arjuna's conch shelled, and the taunt of Gandhava, his mighty bow, struck terror into the hearts of all who heard it. The standard of Pritha's son, bearing the device of a lion's tail, blazed like a comet in the sky, its colors shifting like the hues of dawn. The warriors on both sides fought with valor and skill, their swords clashing and arrows flying through the air. But Arjuna was a force to be reckoned with, his Gandhava flashing like lightning as he poured arrow after arrow into the fray. His shouts echoed through the battlefield, resonating like the thunder of Indra himself. As the battle raged on, the dust raised by the combatants created a swirling storm that obscured all vision. The cries of the wounded and dying mingled with the clash of steel on steel, creating an unearthly din that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Sanjaya's heart went out to both sides, his compassion torn asunder by the ferocity of the conflict. The king of Kalinga, accompanied by Jayadratha and a host of other kings, rallied their forces to support Bhishma. But the Pandavas, united in their determination to vanquish their foes, pressed forward with all their might. The dust devils danced across the battlefield, hiding the warriors from view as they clashed in a frenzy of steel and furious. The sun dipped below the horizon, its light obscured by the swirling dust. The battle reached its climax. Elephants trumpeted in terror, their massive bodies crashing to the ground as they fought for dominance. Charioteers were crushed beneath the feet of their own steeds, while warriors fell like autumn leaves before the onslaught of the Pandavas. In this maelstrom of chaos and destruction, Sanjaya stood witness to the fury of war. His heart heavy with sorrow, he beheld the devastation that had been wrought upon the field, and yet even in the midst of such carnage, he saw a glimmer of beauty, the steadfast courage of the warriors who fought on, their hearts unbroken despite the horrors they endured. As the battle finally began to subside, Sanjaya's eyes fell upon the vast expanse of destruction that stretched before him. The field was strewn with the bodies. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as the armies of the Pandavas and Kauravas clashed in a frenzy of steel and splintering wood. Sanjaya, the narrator, watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation as the warriors engaged one another in a spectacle of unrelenting ferocity. In the midst of this chaos, Bhishma, that mighty bowman and son of Santanu, stood tall, his golden-tipped arrows slicing through the air like scimitars. He was an invincible warrior, feared by all who knew him, and today he would unleash his full fury upon the Pandavastama. The strong and fierce brother of Yudhisthira charged towards Bhishma with a roar, his massive fists swinging wildly as he hurled himself at the Kaurava leader. But Bhishma was not to be underestimated. With a swift motion, he drew back his bowstring and loosed an arrow that pierced Bhishma's armor like a hot knife through butter. The impact sent them stumbling backward, but he refused to yield in rage. He hurled a dart at Bhishma, which the Kaurava warrior deftly intercepted with his staff. The two warriors clashed, their arrows and darts flying back and forth in a blur of motion as they exchanged blows. Meanwhile, Satyakaya, that mighty Kar warrior from the Vrishai clan, rode into battle on his chariot, his bow singing as he loosed arrow after arrow at Bhishma. The Kaurava leader was undaunted. However, with a swift motion, he drew back his own bowstring and sent an arrow flying straight and true towards Satyakaya's charioteer. The charioteer fell, and the horses bolted in terror as Satyakaya leaped from his chariot to escape the carnage. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the warriors flashed their cries and roars, mingling with the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel on steel. As the battle raged on, Sanjaya watched with a sense of despair wash over him. This was no ordinary conflict. It was a war between brothers, a struggle that would leave none unscathed. The gods themselves seemed to be watching from above, their faces stern and unforgiving as they witnessed the carnage below. And yet amidst this sea of blood and steel, there were moments of beauty and nobility. When Bhishma pierced Bhima's armor with his arrow, Sanjaya felt a pang of sorrow. But when Bhima retaliated by piercing Duryodhana with 10 sharp-tipped arrows, the narrator felt a surge of admiration for the Pandava warrior. As the battle reached its crescendo, Sanjaya realized that this was no ordinary war. It was a conflict between two great armies, each driven by their own sense of. The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the clash of steel on steel. In this maelstrom of war, one warrior stood out, Satyakaya, the mighty armed, son of Prishatai, invincible in battle with his excellent bow, capable of bearing a great strain. He shot innumerable winged arrows resembling snakes of virulent poison. His hand moved with a lightness that seemed almost divine, as if he were a mass of clouds pouring a thick shower of rain upon the enemy. King Duryodhana, observing Satyakaya's prowess, dispatched 10,000 chariots against him. But the great bowman was not to be defeated so easily with his celestial weapons. He slew all those mighty chariot warriors with ease, leaving them strewn across the battlefield like fallen leaves. Having achieved this feat, Satyakaya approached Purisravas in battle. The enhancer of the fame of the Kuras beheld the Dhartarashtra ranks thus felled by Duryodhana and rushed against him in wrath, drawing his great bow, which resembled that of Indra himself in hue. He shot thousands of shafts like snakes of virulent poison, displaying his extreme lightness of hand. The combatants who followed Satyakaya were unable to bear those fatal arrows and fled away in all directions, abandoning their leader in the conflict. The mighty sons of Duryodhana, however, cased in excellent mail, bearing diverse arms and possessing excellent standards, approached Purisravas in battle. They addressed him thus: "Listen, O kinsman of the Kauravas, although that art possessed of great strength, come fight in battle with us, with either all of us jointly, or with each of us separately. Vanquishing us in battle, thou mayst win great renown, or ourselves vanquishing thee will have great gratification." Purisravas, proud of his prowess and excited with rage, replied to them, "Ye Kauravas, ye have said well. If such be now your wish, fight ye then all together with care. I shall slay all of you in battle." Thus addressed by him, those heroic and mighty bowmen covered the chastisers of foes with a thick shower of arrows. The battle between Purisravas alone on one side and the many united together on the other raged on into the afternoon. The 10 heroes surrounding Satyakaya's son endeavored to slay him, but he cut off their bows and then their heads with sharp shafts, sending them crashing down upon the earth like mighty trees felled by the thunder. Beholding his mighty sons thus slain in battle, the Vrishni hero Satyakaya uttered a loud roar and rushed against Purisravas. The two warriors pressed their chariots against each other's. The sun had barely risen over the battlefield when the armies of the Kuras and the Pandavas clashed in a frenzy of steel and sound. The air was electric with anticipation as both sides prepared for battle. King Yudhishthira, resolute and determined, addressed Prishadhyamna, his trusted commander, and instructed him to deploy their forces in the Makara formation. Prishadhyamna's eyes gleamed with a warrior's fervor as he issued the order to the Kar warriors. The army began to take shape, its various components forming a majestic whole. At the head of the array stood Drupada and Arjuna, the son of Pandu, their faces set in fierce determination. Sahadeva and Nakula formed the eyes of the formation, while Bhima, the mighty warrior, took up his position as the beak. The rest of the army followed suit, each soldier taking his place with precision and skill. Subhadra's son, along with the sons of Draupadi and Gatotkacha, formed the neck of the array, while Yudhishthira stood proudly at its center. King Virata took up position as the back of the formation, supported by Drashidyumna and a formidable forces. The Pandavas completed their formation. They were met with an equally impressive sight. The Kaurava army, arrayed in the shape of a huge crane, at its beak stood Drona, the revered Guru. His eyes, blazing with the warriors, Pashanaswadaman and Kripa, formed the eyes of the formation, while Kritavarma, the greatest bowman of all, took up position at its head. The two armies faced each other, their formations bristling with steel and fury. The battle commenced, and the sounds of war echoed across the landscape. The blare of conches, the beat of drums, the clash of steel on steel. Elephants charged against elephants. Horsemen clashed with horsemen. Car warriors fought car warriors, and foot soldiers engaged in hand-to-hand combates. The conflict raged on Bhima. The son of Kunti beheld Drona and rushed to meet him. The two warriors clashed, their steel flashing in the sunlight as they exchanged blows. Drona's arrows flew swift and true, piercing Emma with 9 shafts made wholly of iron. But Bhima would not be defeated so easily. He dispatched Drona's charioteer to the realm of Yama. Enraged by this setback, Drona began to consume the Pandava army like a fire consuming a heap of cotton. The Srinjayas and Kakayas took flight as their comrades fell around them. Emma and Arjuna fought on their blades, slicing through the enemy lines with deadly precision. The sun was setting over Hastinapura, casting a golden glow over the bustling city. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, surrounded by the sounds of preparation for war. He turned to Sanjaya, his trusted advisor, and began to speak with a sense of pride and confidence. "Your army is the greatest in all the land," he declared. "It is a force unlike any other, comprised of diverse units, each one excelling in its own unique way. Its efficiency is unmatched, and it is arrayed according to the rules of science, making it nearly unbeatable." He paused for a moment, serving his kingdom with a sense of satisfaction. "The soldiers are not too old or too young," he continued. "They are neither lean nor corpulent, but rather men of strong frames and well-developed bodies, free from disease. They are clad in mail and armed to the teeth, skilled in every kind of warfare. They have been tested time and again, and proven themselves to be worthy warriors." Dhritarashtra's eyes gleamed with pride as he spoke of his army. "But it is not just their physical prowess that makes them so formidable," he said. "They are also skilled in the art of war, able to wield swords, spears, and masses with ease. They have been trained in every aspect of combat, from riding elephants to fighting on horseback, and they are protected by some of the greatest warriors in all the land. Drona, Bhishma, Kritavarman, Kripa, and many others." The king's voice rose in excitement as he spoke of his army's strength, and yet he said, his tone changing to one of sorrow. "Despite their many advantages, despite their bravery and skill, they may still be defeated. It is a thought that fills me with despair, for I know that it is not their fault, but rather the result of fate." Dhritarashtra's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke of his fear. "Sanjaya," he said, turning to his advisor, "I fear that we are powerless against the will of the gods. Vidura had warned us of this, but my son Duryodhana would not listen. I believe that he saw what was coming and tried to warn us. But it seems that our fate is sealed." The king's eyes dropped, and for a moment his voice was lost in thought. "But perhaps," he said, "finally, perhaps all of this has been ordained by the Creator himself. Maybe it is not just chance or circumstance that has led us to this point, but rather the will of the divine. I fear that we are powerless against such forces." "Sanjaya," the king's voice was barely above a whisper, and his words hung in the air like a challenge to fate itself. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Bhima, the mighty warrior from the Pandava clan, charged forward with his sharp shafts. His target was the army of Dhritarashtra, led by the proud Duryodhana. Sanjaya, the charioteer of Duryodhana, looked on in dismay, knowing that this calamity had been brought upon them by their own king's fault. As Bhima broke through the Kaurava lines, his younger brothers, Dasasana, Durvaza, Dasaha, Dharmada, Jaya, Jayasna, Vikarna, Chitrasna, Sudarsana, Charachitra, Suvarman, and many others rallied to defend their kin. They surrounded Bhima, determined to take his life. But the son of Pandu was not one to be intimidated. He stood tall, his mass at the ready, as if he were Surya himself. Surrounded by the fire's planets, the battle raged on, with thousands of Kara warriors armed to the teeth, showering them with arrows and spears. But he fought on undeterred, slaying many of the Kaurava warriors who dared to stand in his way. His mass rose and fell, crushing elephants and steeds beneath its mighty Blows meanwhile Drishtadyumna, the son of Prishita, was engaged in battle with Drona, the greatest warrior of the Kauravas. But when he heard that Bhima was alone and surrounded by the enemy, he knew he had to act quickly. He forsook his engagement with Drona and rushed towards the spot where Bhima was fighting. As Drishtadyumna approached, he saw Bhima like a tempest devouring the Kaurava ranks with the east. The son of Prishita's heart swelled with pride as he beheld his friend and kinsman in action. He knew that Bhima needed his help, and so he charged forward, determined to stand by him. The two warriors fought side by side, their masses rising and falling in perfect syncopation. The Kaurava warriors, led by Duryodhana's sons, rallied to attack them, but they were no match for the combined might of Bhima and Drishtadyumna. The battle raged on, with arrows flying through the air like a swarm of locusts. Just when it seemed that the tide was turning in their favor, Drona appeared on the scene, his three fires, shafts piercing Drupida's body. But even as the old king fell to the ground, his son Drishtadyumna stood firm, his mass still rising and falling with deadly precision. The Kaurava warriors were stunned by the Pramulana weapon wielded by Drishtadyumna, and the battle raged on, and King Duryodhana's senses slowly returned to him. He shook off the effects of Bhima's earlier blows and once again summoned his strength to resist. A mighty warrior, his sons, united in their determination, fought valiantly alongside him against Bhimasnevima. His arms, as strong as ever, climbed back onto his chariot and charged towards Duryodhana's sons. He grasped a bow adorned with gold, its power capable of vanquishing even the bravest foes with swift precision. He shot arrow after arrow at Duryodhana's sons, each one finding its mark in their armor. Duryodhana himself took aim and fired a long, sharp shaft that struck them right at his vitals. The mighty warrior stumbled, but refused to fall. His rage burning brighter than ever, he drew back his own bow, the strings creaking with tension as he prepared to strike back. His eyes blazed with fury as he launched 3 arrows at Duryodhana's arms and chest, but despite being struck by Bhima's counterattack, Duryodhana stood firm like a mountain, unmoved. His younger brothers, however, were not so fortunate. They had been watching the battle unfold, their faces set in determination to carry out their earlier plan of afflicting the Mesna with terrible deeds. As they charged towards him, Bhima rushed forward, an elephant charging into battle, his fury and energy fueled by his desire for victory. He struck Chitrasna with a long arrow that found its mark. Then with swift precision he shot down Duryodhana's other sons, each one falling to the ground as if struck by the gods themselves. Meanwhile, King Yudhishthira had been watching the battle unfold from his chariot. He carefully dispatched 12 of his mightiest warriors, including Abhimanyu and others, to follow Bhimasna into the fray. These brave soldiers charged towards Duryodhana's sons, their armor shining like the sun or fire in all its glorious. They approached Duryodhana's sons, saw them coming, and abandoned their fight against Bhima. They turned their chariots around, eager to face this new threat. But the sons of Kunti would not let them escape so easily. They watched with a mixture of sadness and determination as Duryodhana's sons fled from the battle. As scene was one of chaos and confusion, with warriors clashing and arrows flying through the air. But amidst all the turmoil, Bhima stood tall, his bow still in hand, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Abhimanyu, with Bhima by his side, charged into the fray. The Kaurava army, led by Duryodhana, watched in awe as the young warrior's skill and bravery left them stunned. With each passing moment of Abhimanyu's prowess grew his arrows flying swift and true as he took down enemy soldiers. With his aim on those who faced him was Vaikarna, a mighty Kaur warrior whose steeds were slain by Abhimanyu's unyielding onslaught. As Vaikarna leaped onto the resplendent chariot of Chitrasna, Abhimanyu's arrows rained down upon them, piercing Vaikarna with 25 small shafts. Yet the warrior stood firm, his resolve unshaken like the mighty mountain Mira. Meanwhile, Durjaya and Vaikarna joined forces to strike at Abhimanyu, their iron-tipped arrows baying deep into his armor. But Abhimanyu did not flinch, his body a testament to his unwavering courage in the face of danger. As the battle raged on, Dussasana clashed with the 5 Kekaya brothers, their swords flashing in the sunlight as they fought with all their might. The sons of Draupadi, their rage and fury unabated, resisted Duryodhana's attacks with unyielding ferocity. Each of them struck true, piercing their enemy with 3 swift arrows that sent shivers down the spines of those who watched, and yet Duryodhana remained unbroken, his own arrows slicing through the air to strike back at his foes. As the fight intensified. Bhishma entered the fray, his presence like a tempest on the battlefield. With each blow, he struck fear into the hearts of the Pandava army, sending them reeling as if they were but mere cattle under his command. The sound of Gandharva's horn echoed through the air, signaling Arjuna's arrival. On the right flank of the battlefield itself seemed to come alive with death and destruction. Thousands of headless trunks stood upright amidst the chaos, while the ground ran red with blood like